Hey there, CIS276. Let me start by explaining that something has gone terribly, terribly wrong with the session numbers here in Eagle. The best I can figure is probably I was scrolling through things like on my iPad and I must have deleted like a session, because if you'll look at the sessions the way they are now, and this must have been in between last week Monday when I recorded this because they were all good, and this week Monday because they are not. um, so what you will probably have seen is a session for part one, and then a session five part two, and something must have happened in between there. The good news is it looks like most everybody just used the due dates instead of the modules and has been handing everything in okay. So, what this will mean is if you have not yet completed the Chapter 5 challenges, I will take them without penalty through the end of this session, which is chapter session rather 5. I don't know how that escaped my attention. If it indeed did, I don't know. I mean, it's true. I have a calendar like issue. I've taken a lot of blunt force trauma to the skull, but like I think probably it was when I was scrolling through stuff. At any rate, here in session five, we have session five, six, and seven remaining. These summer sessions here through the pandemic have been truncated by 1 week, but the good news is everybody's still on track. I'm actually really pleased with the progress that everybody has been making to date through our material. So with these 3 sessions, we have 2 chapters. This session will cover chapter 6, in which we explore functions. Functions takes a big step forward in the modular design of your applications. Every application, though functional, that you have built to date relies on essentially brute force, right? Where if you are going to print a set of menus, for example, for something like the vending machine, you would have had to copy and paste wholesale your menu. You would have had to copy and paste wholesale the layout for your gas station pump or what have you. And undoubtedly, what you have discovered is that number one, that makes an awful lot of code. And you're paid by the project. You are not paid, unfortunately, by the line, in which case we would never have developed functions, because you could get paid by the line. What a function does is say, let's look at our code logically and let's identify a single purpose, and I'm going to reuse the word function here, a single purpose item that we will use again and again and again, like printing a menu, for example, like displaying an error code, for example, like doing math on simple interest, for example. Those are specific purpose items that we can pull out of the code, that we can name specifically, like calculate simple interest or display menu. And then over the course of running our application, if we find that, yeah, I'm going to need to repeat that piece of code, instead of having to repeat wholesale all 30 or 60 or 2,000 lines of a piece of code, you can simply refer to it by name and have a separate location where that function lives that you can go to reference, and actually get its functionality. The even better part is later on, over the long life of a piece of code, 2 years later, 2 weeks later, depending on how fast your application has to change. When you have to go to make a change to your code, instead of having to find all 300 references to a menu that you would have displayed, instead of having to find all 300 references to, compound interest or what have you. We can just go to the one place that that function is and make that change. And then the code can simply continue without having to risk making a mistake, without having to accidentally have missed one of those locations where you had copied and pasted that code. That's a huge problem. So functions helps you address that. Number one, it helps you reduce the amount of time it takes you to code things because you're reusing it. And number two, when things have to change, you know exactly where the reference for that is. So as in previous sessions that were named correctly, here in session 5, there are in fact two parts. There's the chapter 6 exercises, and then there is the chapter 6 challenge. You will also notice in the session, or the part 1 of the session, there are code samples. Now, I know that some of you have been referencing the code samples. I know that many of you have not. And just as a verbal breadcrumb here, there is a workable solution to part of what you'll have to do for the week here in those code samples. So don't forget to take a look there. And also don't forget to message me with a question or with a piece of code is even better, as you have questions this week. So you've got a full plate with chapter 6 because it's one of those boom, mind-blowing chapters. So have at it, 276.